That was a very bracing and inspiring 3 papers, wasn't it? Makes you rethink your life choices about your research, hearing such brilliant work like that. I'm Shahidha, as Audra suggested earlier. I'm Shahidha Bari. I'm at London College of Fashion and at the University of the Arts London. And I work in fashion and philosophy and cultural studies. And I also work for the BBC as a presenter for BBC Arts documentaries. And you may recognise my voice from BBC Radio 4's Free Thinking and Start the Week. So I'm very glad to be here to talk to you about, or talk with, our wonderful panellists. Our panellists are Bambo Soyinka. Bambo is the Research Director and Professor of Story at StoryArcs, where she leads pioneering work at the intersection of narrative, technology and creative innovation. She's recognised as the world's first Professor of Story. If any of you anybody else here is Professor of Story, you don't exist. It's Bambo. And she's shaping new directions for storytelling. And Douglas Atkinson at the end there. Douglas is Reader in Fashion Technologies at Manchester Metropolitan University, exploring the future of fashion through digital and material innovation. His work, he works specifically with the Robotics Living Lab at Manchester Metropolitan University, and his work focuses on how new technologies can transform creative practice. That already sounds pretty exciting, doesn't it? Tupac Martir is an artist and founder at Studio, renowned for blending art, performance and cutting-edge technology into immersive, genre-defying experiences. His work pushes the boundaries of live production, visual innovation and audience engagement. And Michael Riley. Michael is Director of the Black Music Research Unit at the University of Westminster, leading research into Black British music and cultural heritage. He's a pioneering musician and academic, and he champions innovation in music and culture. And you may have visited his amazing exhibition, co-curated at the British Library, and perhaps he'll tell you a bit more about that. So the questions we have together, we have about 45 minutes. The questions we have together, we've sort of shaped them together in discussion, but I have a strong conviction that we're going to vary off onto various tangents and have a very provocative conversation too. But the first conversation that we shaped was sort of used your research, Bambo, as a starting point. So perhaps we'll start with you. And this is the question. As AI and emerging technologies reshape the creative landscape, how might our very definition of story expand and open new territories for narrative creation, participation and experience?
Thank you. What I'm noticing with AI is not so much a reinvention of the definition of story, but a return to some of the more kind of original ancient ways of thinking about story. And to understand where I'm coming from with that, if we zoom out to the 20th century or even the 400 years that preceded that, story became something that was very much packaged, a product, fixed in a book or a film. There was an idea that we produced stories for audiences or readers, but traditional senses of stories, story flows, it's more of a condition than an output, and it's a way of navigating our reality. It's a way of co-creating a sense of renewal, of regeneration, and also coherence as well. So that's what story does at its best. It works as an ecology. We're now at this turning point where story could become that with new technologies, but we also have the legacy of these systems of control. So story as coherence, if you're looking at that from an ecology point of view, it's very open and participatory, but we still have those systems of control as well. So for me, the kind of the key question, or the key question for us as we work and we participate in new technologies, is are we facilitating conditions for co-creation and participation, or are we amplifying systems of control and extraction?
And is there a particular example you have in mind when you talk about systems of control and technologies of story? Are there, just to give us a sense of something concrete that we might be able to gain purchase on?
My understanding of story comes from my own embodied experience, but also from projects that I work on. So one of the projects I'm working on is working with story fellows, and they're working in communities at a local level, and the stories are kind of negotiated and they're live. Story within kind of control systems, the control can come from different reasons. It can come out of a sense of fear or out of a wanting to be named as a sort of the author and the owner. So control isn't necessarily something always that's bad in itself. It emerges out of our interactions. But as we're moving into these AI systems, there's kind of a lot of fear emerging, and some of that fear turns us to the need to control those systems and to manage them. And I think inadvertently, that could lead actually to dampening the emergent potential of those technologies. And I think maybe leave it there, because then we can expand a bit as other people.
Michael, perhaps I can turn to you. Does that term story work for you? Is there a way to think about your research and the innovations that are happening there in terms of story?
I think so. I think as a musician, I wear different hats. I think as a musician, writer, producer, we're always telling stories. I mean, the lyrics are stories. It's an account of your life, your experience, and perhaps that of others. And we're communicating that reality in our work. As an academic, we tend to tell other people's stories in a manner that is challenged by AI. In terms of a research tool. But I think we're also looking at the story of evolving. When I say evolving, it's, I'm wearing my academic hat at this point. If you're a level 3 student, in theory you evolve by the time you graduate into an adult that has learned something. I think AI is challenging the very idea of what the student is, what it is they're learning, and the time span in which they're supposed to absorb this information, and exactly what that information is. But there's a story within each institution. And certainly my work looks at challenging the narrative within institutions. And just to go back to what you mentioned, the exhibition last year, which titled Beyond the Baseline, we looked at 500 years of African and Caribbean contributions to British music. The first challenge to that story was the timeline, where I was told quite bluntly, get a life. It's not real. And it was producing evidence that could take us back to 1511, could take us back to Henry VIII and a character called John Blank. And the evidence was there to tell a different story. So one of the things that I've found is if you're prepared to do the work, and to some extent technology can now assist you to unearth that evidence much quicker, you have to verify it. We're riddled with hallucinations or just blunt technology lies. But if you're prepared to do that work and you validate your research, technology can now allow you to challenge existing narratives, existing stories. And one of the interesting things about that is you attract a different audience. And with that particular project, we had just under 50,000 people at King's Cross and just over 764,000, what do you call them? Just call them people got involved across the 31 regional libraries.
Yeah, wow.
But most of that interaction was first time. This was a new audience that we'd connected to.
And they were engaging digitally?
Digitally and footfall. King's
Yeah.
Cross was just under 50,000.
Yeah.
The point here is if you get the story right, you connect with a whole new audience in a whole new way. Right. That previously, whatever stories were being told in those spaces didn't connect.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for me, it's an opportunity. It's work, but it is an opportunity.
Yeah, it was a remarkable exhibition. That, I mean, precisely because it shifted the timeline, as you put it. Or what you thought that history was of black music.
But we engaged across the timeline in lots of different areas, and technology was involved in analysing some of the photographs, the history that was told in those spaces, the music. We had a fantastic film in the last room where we time travelled.
Yeah.
But technology allowed us to have screens on the ceiling, screens on the four sides of the walls, And the experience of telling the story, technology has allowed us to explore new ways to tell that story to an intergenerational audience. And I think that's a big part of storytelling now.
Yeah.
You're not talking to one individual or one generation. You have to connect across the generations, across space. And that's what I find is now interestingly complicated, but urgent to understand. Yeah.
Tupac, you want to come in? What's your story?
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk about not only age groups, but we also have to talk about socioeconomical moments and the opportunity to have that technology or to be acquired to that technology. I think that one thing that pandemic taught us is that we all thought we were in the same technological level. And really quickly, we understood that we were not. And that was a challenge for students, that was a challenge for professors, that was a challenge for people doing work, for people that had 2 children, and obviously they had to do this. And the knowledge that they have about, I still get the classic of, my Wi-Fi is not working. How am I supposed to do it? But I think that when we start looking at story, we have to look at points of entry, right? And I always say, my grandma will come in and want to watch it on TV. My dad will come and watch it on stage. My cousin will want to be in a VR headset. My nephew will want to be in his phone. And so everybody has a different point of entry. And I think the most important thing that we're trying to do right now, which is what we're trying to do with this piece unique that we did, is I changed the point of entry so that the story doesn't change, but the way that you come to it is the easiest, less friction amount for you to understand it. But also understanding that let's say the window in which you're looking at it will have an influence in the way that you understand it. And so suddenly this story that I think is one single thing, not only is it different because of where you come from and your ideas, but also the way that you're looking into it. And in a moment in time in which we have so many different ways of looking at the world and so many different points of view, it becomes incredibly important to make sure that we, as creators, understand the essence of what we're trying to do. Because that essence is the only thing that actually is real and exists. The moment you let it go, it's up to everybody else in the world to understand what the hell is it that you're trying to tell.
Yeah. And just quickly, the project that you're working on, Unique, what is it very quickly?
So Unique is this, just to make it really quickly, I wrote an LLM in 2018-19 in which I taught it how to compose music.
Right.
And then once I'm happy with how that LLM was working, I write 8 bars of music, I give it to the LLM, the model creates 32 bars of melody, 32 bars of chord progression. I then, once I'm happy with that, because I play with the model, I tell it all the other instruments that I want, I give it to the musicians then perform it, and I have 24 hand signs based on Butch Morris's conduction to change the way that the music is developed.
Yeah.
So I can make anything that I want within those 32 bars of music. And then they're playing, and all that music goes to the sound desk. It gets transformed into data, and then that data goes to every single thing that is then being rendered, whether it's the visuals that you see on stage, elements that exist in AR that you can see through an iPad. If you are in a VR headset, you're moving through worlds that are being generated as we play music. If you are at home, you can watch a stream that has mixed reality embedded into it, which is being created by the way they play the music. And then you can be at home and listen to the radio, or you can actually be at home anywhere in the world, and I give you a code, and you're gaming online with the whole world's being created by whatever we're playing online.
Your granny is wrong. You don't want to watch it on telly. You want it on the VR headset. That sounds amazing. Doug, what about you? What's your story?
So I think fundamentally the story aspect for me touches on the fact that fashion is generally talked about in 2 distinct ways, and one of them is very much the glamour of the design side of the industry, and one of them is the horrendous negative stories we hear around fashion production. And I think what we're trying to do with the Robotics Living Lab is find ways that technology can shift the narrative around fashion production to actually encourage more people into the manufacturing side of the business as well as the design side of the business. Because we urgently need to reshore making to this country, so we're not relying on huge supply chains and relying on perhaps unethical labour as well. So I think part of that narrative is to try and emphasize that actually there's a huge amount of creativity in the manufacturing side of the fashion industry. These are the people who problem solve how to pattern cut a garment, they problem solve how to make it a reality, and they're often really unrecognized. So what we want to do is combine an interest in new technologies like robotics or like the software systems that you can become a real technical expert in, with a love for creativity and a kind of a narrative around how you can use them to really be a creative person that makes things rather than just designs things.
Yeah. Well, this takes us to our second question, which is about the role of emerging technologies. How do and how are emerging technologies challenging our existing creative infrastructures, and what role does creative research play in helping us navigate these next generation tools and practices?
So I think we have a particularly interesting challenge in this country in that most of our fashion manufacturing hasn't really been invested in for a long, long time. It relies on very traditional methods and tools. And yet we're educating designers, we're educating like people who are ready to go into a very digitized industry.
Yeah.
So now you can fully prototype a garment in 3D software, and then maybe you'd make a final sample.
Yeah.
So we have designers and students who are ready to kind of will go into a digital workflow that actually right now the industry in this country doesn't support. And so part of the work we're trying to do is not only to build new tools that are accessible, that can actually go into smaller manufacturing units and aren't designed for the likes of Zara, who can spend £100,000 on a cutting machine for fabrics, which then comes with a £20,000 a year service contract. So it's trying to actually make some of these tools accessible in a way that can be implemented here, that can be part of a creative ecosystem in the UK and manufactures things close to the retail market.
Yeah.
So there's partly that idea that we need to develop the tools, but then some of the challenges, I think, are being driven more from the design side to say, well, we can see opportunities for this. How can we work with a manufacturer who might then be able to realize our vision for, say, an automated laser cutting system that could embellish garments automatically? So I think what we're doing is actually working as a bureau to kind of bring in manufacturers so we can showcase the possibilities that they could kind of engage with if they were investing in technical tools, and to make sure that it's very visible for them how this investment would benefit them, and that it's not something that would actually kind of interfere with their workflow, but it's really driving their creativity.
Sounds amazing. That sounds industry changing, doesn't it?
Well, we hope so.
Yeah. What about the rest of you? Emerging technologies challenging our existing creative infrastructures?
I've got an answer, but I want to maybe just ask you something. You said something about that we can't really understand the shift until we understand the essence of it. Can you just explain what you mean by that, and then I'll add a little bit to that?
I think that, especially when I see it a lot on the work that I do, where I think I'm being very clear about where a story or where a type of production would go. So for example, in Cosmos, it was all about loss, right? And then I explore loss out of that. In Unique, I explain, the essence of it is, who am I when I go to sleep? And what does this body exist? And what is my brain? And what is my soul? And all those kinds of things, In Kai, in the new piece, I'm trying to understand, who is it that actually exists throughout my life? Which bit of me is the same and which bit of me changes?
Yeah, so I think in answer to your question, that's how I see what's happening with new technologies as well. We're asking a lot of questions, like we're trying to keep up with the speed of the change, or sometimes we're thinking, we're afraid that AI is replicating us or our ways of seeing things. But what we really haven't done is to stop and say, what type of change is this really? So I think that we're at a point that's similar to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution or the revolution of the printing press. And what changed there was a whole-scale change in our relationship to knowledge. So it wasn't just that we created books, but those books changed our approach to science, to religion, to the arts. They changed our way of seeing. And it fed back into our embodied understanding of the world and how we interact and what we produced in the world. And I think that that's what's happening with new technologies now, is that there's this change happening, and it's a change in perception. It's potentially an expansion of perception and a reconfiguration of perception. But if we approach it from the old mindset, the industrial mindset, that's when we get these issues with control, because it's an old system trying to interact with a fundamentally new way of seeing and knowing and being.
That sounds...
No, it's just because of something we spoke earlier today.
Well, why don't we share it with our audience?
Well, I don't know. I think I have a concept around what I call the 3Ds, which is denial, what's the other one? Denial, delay, and doubt. Mm-hmm. And when working with new technology, I think we're saddled or challenged by these emotions. In terms of denial, I think most people have engaged with some aspect of current technology, whether they're aware of it or not. But within that group, they have just enough information to make confident, ill-informed decisions about the technology. Yeah. And then when we look at the delay, because it's an ill-informed decision, they slow down their engagement with this technology, which is problematic, especially for the investors and whatever and so on. And if you slow down engagement with new technology, in other words, the rate at which you engage with learning it on an individual basis, you then end up with the doubt at the end. And what the market wants is confidence, not doubt. And if we look at what's happening in America at the moment, one of the issues is that we have the early adopters, the investors and whatever, promoting this technology in a way that has created ridiculous ideas of the value of it, but doubt is now creeping in because of the slow adoption across the piece. And that doubt can crash economies. And what we're looking at, if that happens, is a major crash globally because we're now depending on this. So for me, it's a complicated one. If I just bring it back to the work that I'm doing, we're currently working on a TV program, 5-part TV drama/comedy for the BBC called Borders with our music students. And we're on series 3, which is brilliant. But across series 1 and 2, it was absolute murder for me as the sole person putting in all the metadata for all the students working on a project where from one day to the next, they would change their name. Oh, this is not my artist name today. Oh, I'm a producer now, and I have a different name for the producer, and I'm the engineer, I've got a different name. And so we created an app. Now, just jump back to the series 1. We didn't have the knowledge to do that, or the confidence. We were doubting, and we delayed engagement. By series 3, it took us all of a week to create an app, a metadata app, to ingest all of the minutiae of your name, your date, your bank account, your address, all the various artist names, the song titles, the length of the song, everything. Students can click on it on their phones and ingest that information. So, you know, by adjusting the idea of should you engage, should you be doubting, should you be delaying around this technology, you're falling further and further behind. And I'll just end on saying that within academia, we used to be even the most up-to-date institutions were 3 to 4 years behind the curve. With technology, we're up to 10 or more years now behind the curve because of this delay, doubt, and denial.
So we need to be braver and more assertive and confident within academic contexts and engaging with this technology.
Absolutely. We have to accept that there's a tsunami coming towards us.
Yeah.
In fact,
there's no going back.
It's here.
Yeah.
It's here.
Well, let's go with that, the coming tsunami. If you were pitching a major creative project, Michael, 5 years from now, 5 years older Michael, what are the values, the impacts, or the visions that you would be centering in that pitch?
Well, first I'd challenge the timeline that it's ridiculous, it's a nonsense.
5 years?
5 years, it's just ridiculous nonsense.
Why
All
is it
these,
nonsense?
well, because if we look at what's happening in AI, which evolves around about every 5.3 months, every 5.7 months, you
Yeah.
have a whole new level of power
Yeah.
in the system. To predict what will happen in 5 years is a nonsense, because we don't know what's going to happen next year. In fact, we're lying about what's going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months right now. This is governments, this is institutions, this is actually where we're at. If a student signs up today that is looking to exit with a job in 36 months, we have to pivot very quickly now to reposition that individual, and everything we're supplying that individual with, even if they were going to exit in 6 months' time, as opposed to 36 months. So there's a seismic shift between what I call the 3Ds, and how people are engaging and institutions are engaging, and where we're at in this moment in terms of engaging with technology. I don't know if you want to take that up too, Pat.
I mean, it's it's a funny one, isn't it? So I studied painting, drawing, etching, photography in what was called digital art in the late 90s, which digital art in the late 90s, now it's that. And yet, I think that the curiosities and the ideas that I had of what I wanted to do with digital art haven't changed, right? So I still started with a drawing or a painting and taking a picture and taking it to the darkroom and printing that image and digitizing that image and do something in Photoshop and taking it out and printing it and taking a picture and then scratching the, and doing all these elements that were analog to digital to analog. And I'm still thinking that's exactly the same way that we do. The difference is what we now consider analog is very different to what we considered back then. So for example, if I told you, for us, right, well, let's say for the new generations, AI is technology. For us, a computer was technology. For my mother, a calculator was technology. For my grandfather, an abacus was technology, And so the idea of technology changing, yes, it does. But a lot of the essence of what we're trying to do with it doesn't. And so I think that when we go back to the essence of what we need to do, if I was to pitch something in 5 years, which I agree with you, is ridiculous. I don't think it changes in the terms of what is it that I'm trying to tell. I'm still trying to tell you a story about loss. I'm still trying to tell you a story about who am I when I go to sleep. Like, those things don't change because technology is not embedded in me yet. But, let's be honest, we're getting there. But at this moment, that's the reality of it, And I think that to anybody who thinks that technology is our savior, and I love technology, technology is not our savior, because we can see easily how freaking fascinating it is, how it disappoints us every single day of our lives. Yeah? And so I think that if we maintain that what we're trying to do is a humanistic experience that happens to be enhanced by a technology, by an element that comes from outside of us, and we understand what those things are, then we really start approaching, and we can then be technology agnostic about what we're trying to do.
I think, sorry. I was just going to say, to speak to that point, I think the only way you can even envisage 5 years in the future is to say that you'll co-create technologies. Because as you say, we'll want them to perform similar functions, but the things they're able to do will change. And I think we're so used to the idea that technology is given to us on a plate by Silicon Valley, and we have no engagement with it. And actually, to your point of being constantly frustrated, if we actually work with the people using the technologies to build them and to develop them, we might come up with something that's much more useful for us as creative people.
Yeah, great. Bambi?
Yeah. So I'd absolutely fully agree. It's I've got a slightly different take on the delay and slowing down. So for me, you have to start with the idea that the system, any system that we're ever in, is human and it's ecological. And sometimes we can't outrun the tsunami. So the only way to do it is really just to slow down to the kind of the speed of humanity, the speed of the ecology, and the speed of emergence as well. So I think for me, that's where if I was going to pitch a research project, it would be about looking at the conditions within which creativity can emerge. So how can we create more participation within the system, or how can we facilitate more participation and more agency within the system?
It's interesting. I might push back on that and say, well, if the tsunami is inevitable, it's about positionality.
Yeah.
I'd look for the highest hill, mountain,
Yeah.
to position myself to weather the tsunami. And for me, I'd be making haste to get to that
Yes.
position. I'm not slowing down.
Yeah.
And that's, that's where the denial comes in. Have we got enough time to be slowing down?
Yeah, so I love your analogy there, because it's an ecological analogy, and I think the system can hold different responses. So your ecological response is to find the highest point, and I think that's a good one. But if everybody did that, and that would be an issue. My response is to slow down to the speed of emergence, and we need multiple responses, and we need a system that allows multiple responses.
That makes sense to me. I wonder if we could pick up the question of access, which was raised earlier, about how we, maybe this is to you, Tupac, and anybody else who wants to join in, but how do we create work that remains accessible to a wide range of audiences while still inspiring people to engage with physical experiences? You must be thinking about this a lot.
Oh, this is the basis of everything that I do, unfortunately. But I'll give you an example where, like, if I'm designing a fashion show, right? I design the fashion show in a completely different way. So I design the arrival for the people that are coming into the building to get a feeling of what that space needs to be, because that's almost like a prelude to the collection, yeah? And then I turn off the lights, and then now we're officially in cameras because we're streaming to the rest of the world. And suddenly it's like I cease to care about the people that exist in the room, because they're gonna get a good picture anyway. Now it's all about the anticipation of everything that's gonna happen with the first girl, and how when the lights come up, how does that look on camera? How is that gonna look on photography? How is it gonna look into the stream, yeah? And then eventually when we have the last girl, how does that look? What is the emotion that I'm trying to create? To then eventually, here comes the finale, off it goes, transmission goes away, and then it's, how do I make you feel after the show, right? So all the time I'm thinking about multiple audiences on a regular basis. And I think, unfortunately, that is one thing that we need to look at, and it's the same thing as who's king? Who are you servicing? And you can be servicing multiple people at different times. I always claim that football has been so good because it figured us out really, really quickly. You can go to the stadium, be in the shittiest seat in the entire stadium, but if everyone around you is having a good time and is singing and all that, you're watching the game and you're like, I don't care, this is amazing, there's this human experience, yeah? You can have then the experience of going to the pub and watching the game on TV, which is great, but then you are around your mates and there's a bit of an element into it and you're watching the game. And then you go home and you're still watching an amazing show because it's on TV, where you have a clean toilet and your own groceries and whoever you invited to be watching the game, and you're enjoying the game at the same time.
I guess one of the questions for your work might be is, will people be left behind? And does it matter if people are left behind?
Yes and yes.
Yes. Yes and yes. Yes and yes.
Yes and yes. Yes, because we've seen, I was talking about this yesterday. I'm an indigenous man, right? I'm someone who can see how a lot of my people are being left behind just on a regular basis. If we were in the race, they're 15, 20 kilometers behind us. They haven't even entered the stadium yet. Yeah? Hell, they haven't even arrived at the city. So we are seeing this. And so I think that there's an entire outreach that needs to go to these kinds of communities, and this goes to, Blacks, Asians, Indigenous, we need to go and reach out to those people. Like, some of the most amazing things that can come out of materials, that can come out of textures, come from there, I dress in Indigenous clothes because I want to make sure that I am represented and my people are represented on stages, yeah, that are not forgotten, yeah? And then, yes, we cannot leave anybody behind, but we also need to be really aware of how you're trying to tell this story.
Well, you say how, I think the story is already been told,
yeah.
And this is the issue, and there's a bias in that narrative. And challenging that bias is increasingly difficult. And this is why I'm in this haste, because the power of AI to tell a story convincingly is increasing. It's not decreasing, it's getting better, and it's the time in which it will give you that story is less and less every day. And because it's so convincing, we're now moving to a space where the digital generation is not challenging that, but accepting that narrative, which means if you're not part of that narrative, if your story is not part of what's being scraped, you don't exist. And so there's a race now. It's interesting how America's pitched this story that China is behind, for example. That's a story. Is it true? The answer is no, it is not true. But if you believe that story, then that becomes your truth. And so what's at question here now is truth. In the digital age, what is real? What's reality? And is that reality, how does it impact you? You know, and that is, for me, is the challenge now. If it's stories, stories are all very well until we believe the stories and we turn that belief into actions. And that's where we're at now, and it's extremely dangerous if we're not engaging to challenge the narrative that we're being given in academia and across the news channels, which are increasingly the same person at the head of the news channels. So I think we're at a more precarious point in this world, digital world, AI world, than we choose to believe, which is why I go back to my 3D denial, delay, you know, and doubt, because we need to get rid of that. We need to dive in, learn to swim, and then learn to swim better.
Are there risks involved in that?
Absolutely, absolutely. But there's risks. I would say the risk is greater by not engaging. It's a tsunami.
Bambo, you want to come in?
Yeah, so I mean, what I love about Tupac's approach is that it's not accessibility by gatekeeping or distribution, it's by these multiple points of access and perception as well. So I think that's really crucial for accessibility. But there is a bigger risk than being left behind, and this is where there is a huge danger, and that's being co-opted into the system in a way that you become an object, that you have no voice, that you're forced to act, but without your, So that's where the real danger is. Yeah.
So I think I might flip that a little bit, because I feel like the thing where we're talking about people being left behind, the thing that's in danger of being left behind is the physicality of being human. And so actually, you know, stories are being told like continuously, whether they're true or not, whether they're morphed through technology. But I feel like we're becoming stories detached from our lived experience. And so to speak to the idea of things like indigenous crafts, you know, if people are making beautiful textiles based on years of embodied knowledge and understanding of how to weave something that's built up through physical experience, and yet we're trying to tell that story through a digital platform or through an AI chatbot that has no understanding of what it is to be a human maker, then we really do lose something that's fundamentally human. And so I think, you know, we're talking about kind of interactions with technology. A really critical interaction design challenge is to figure out how to take that human experience with us and how to portray it, and just find ways of recording it before it dies out.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying there, because I think the thing is we already know how to swim, and what sometimes happens is then our way of swimming, it's extracted, repackaged, and sold back to us, and then it's no longer ours. So it's not,
No, I was just going to say that there's almost this element of a lot of technology and a lot of things that are happening. But, you know, going back to the idea of the craft, right? But only a human understands, well, I guess some animals do too, how amazing it is to like peel a mango and eat a mango. You know, what it feels like when you jump into a cold water. And we all know this, the moment that your partner says, we need to talk, everyone knows what that feels like, you know, and it's like, but they're amazing, you know, they're amazing feelings that cannot be packaged, cannot be taught, you know, those are the things that I always go back to it. Like, at the end of the day, I do this job because I don't know how to do anything else. I only do this job because this is what I learned how to do, and it is to connect with other humans and to find ways of connecting with those humans. If technology allows me to enhance that element, then that's welcome. If a technology can allow me to express myself in a way that actually reaches a wider audience, then that's great. But at the end of the day, we don't have to forget that we come from just sitting around the fire and talking to each other and telling each other stories. Like, that is the essence of what we're trying to do.
And I'm not saying the opposite. No. I think what I'm saying is if we don't engage, timely engagement with what's happening, that ability to connect to each other is actually being removed. And psychologically, it's changing the way we think, it's changing the way we interact with each other. I mean, we've already noticed just the COVID years, so 2 years of COVID, has changed the student psychology. So students that are currently coming in have a different way of engaging. And that's just 2 years of being online, intensely online, and being removed from a crucial moment in their development where they would have been otherwise interacting with others in their age group. And just to put a fine point on that, working with record companies, this year they're not signing as many artists because they've recognized that the generation that should have delivered new genres in the UK just haven't, because they haven't been out interacting, challenging whatever music's out there in the clubs. They were not there between 21, 22. They were at home online. And so we haven't got the new genres that would normally be right present here in the UK at the moment. So the companies are not investing. And that then is delay, which they're pushing back for a year, 18 months to see new genres coming out of the UK. So it's, it's serious and it's timely is the point. These disconnections or reconnections through AI have transformed how we think. And those students will socialize online, but find it increasingly difficult to socialize with another human. So I hear you. I'm just saying we need to be challenging that.
I'm conscious that each of you are at the vanguard of your disciplines, certainly the digital and technological facing parts of these disciplines. What are the creative methods or technological breakthroughs that have the power to disrupt, for good or bad, how your sector, your discipline is developing, producing and presenting its work? Could you pinpoint what they are?
One thing is, what are they? And the other question is, are they actually real?
Okay.
We got promised that 5G is going to change our lives. No, I still can't get 5G in half of the country.
Okay.
And so I think there's a lot of the reality, the expectation, and the truth of what's happening right now. And I think that the reality of it is, we don't actually get the reality of what's happening.
Okay.
Big tech talks a big game, and we get shown all these things, but the reality is they don't come down in the way that they're done. And therefore, everything that we're being sold is an illusion. And so trying to say this is the technology that's going to change us, it's a lie, because 3 years ago, nobody knew what Midjourney was.
Right.
And then suddenly that came in, and it changed the way that we see everything. So I think that there's stuff that is going on in the military or in porn that we don't know about, that is going to come into our way and is going to disrupt anything that we know.
I love that that's what we need to be looking at, the military and porn. Doug, what about you?
So yeah, I was just going to say to that kind of idea of Midjourney. Midjourney was something people could pick up so easily because it was a super simple interface. And I think this, especially for creative industries, is the big sticking point. There's a world of tech we could play with, but it's so difficult to actually understand how to program it, how to make it perform a function, that I think the really revolutionary thing would be to have more kind of like low-code and no-code interfaces, and to actually lower that accessibility barrier so people have the chance to play. Because I think, again, there's the idea that you have to spend so long programming a technology to make it do the thing you want to do. You don't dare have it fail. You can't experiment. You can't kind of see what happens with kind of random chance. And so I think lowering that barrier is that is the main thing that will really, really make changes across all creative disciplines.
I think that's a fascinating suggestion. Rather than sort of upskilling us, it's like 30 years too late for me to learn how to code. But if maybe the technologists can make low code or no code, that might be my access point. What you, Bambo?
I think, so maybe just picking up on a few things that you've been saying, I think that the danger and then the opportunity as well is seeing technology as something that's different from us. Technology is craft, and so that for me, the disruptive thing is to really ask, what is this a craft of? And certainly the types of technologies that I'm working with, it's a craft of awareness. And once you begin to see it like that, that's when you can then start disrupting, if that's what you want to do, or engaging with it in a way that enables you to start actually playing and working in a meaningful way with that emergence and that awareness.
I'm going to give the last word to you, Michael. We've run out of time, sadly. What do you think are the creative methods or technological breakthroughs we should be looking out for?
It's a mental one. I think it's regarding this technology as a tool, the most powerful tool that you perhaps have been given access to. But you have to invest the energy to understand how to use it and how to skill up and channel your accumulative life skills into this tool. I think it's a mistake to assume that the tool will adjust for you.
Yeah.
You have to adjust and embrace this tool and do that, I think, with vigor, energy, and haste.
That sounds absolutely exhausting for me, but I hope that you have time to do that over lunch. I'm sorry that we're not taking questions from the audience, but our wonderful panellists are around for the rest of the conference, I think, and certainly after this event, so you can come and talk to them yourselves. In the meantime, I wonder if you might join me in giving them a warm round of applause. Thank you them for their discussion. Thank you very much.
And now, for the TV Fest, now they have a show. Born in the military.
Thank you, guys.